Let's leap into the next part of our of this session with a panel on arts activism here in Los Angeles. Please welcome out Kim Abeles, Joann Malpede, and Nobuko Miyamoto.
Whoa, yeah.
You have a seat now, and then when you want to watch the presentation, you can scurry out to another seat in the house.
Oh, I get it.
Yeah. And I'm going to give a rousing rendition of your bio, which I'm really excited about. And I wish these were all my bios because of the amazing work you've all been doing. Kim Abeles is an artist and Professor Emeritus whose community-based projects explore biography, geography, environmental science, and civic engagement. She has created projects with the California Science Center, air pollution control agencies, health clinics, and mental health departments, and natural history museums in California, Colorado, and Florida. Abeles received the 2013 Guggenheim Memorial Fellowship, and she is a recipient of fellowships from the J. Paul Getty Trust Fund for the Visual Arts, California Community Foundation, and Paula Krasner Foundation. In 1987, she innovated a method to create images from the smog in the air, and the Smog Collector series brought her work to national and international attention. Please welcome to the mic, Kim Abeles.
Hello, thank you for having me. So, an involvement that does not begin with a clear image of its conclusion is really the way I want to go. I call it sometimes walking in the studio with a broken flashlight. This is actually a paper person made out of the trash generated by visitors to the California Science Center on Earth Day. And my hope is, as a permanent piece, they keep seeing their trash up there. We participate in life together, and our actions are created by groups of us, like these shoes in Walk a Mile in My Shoes. They're shoes that belong to the civil rights marchers and local activists, and a cast bronze replica of Dr. King's shoes. Sometimes the sculptures are created as props. They're taken in this case, to teach school children about the storm drain system. At best, when I bring these into classrooms, we then follow up with a workshop, and they really allow this opportunity to talk about things like recycling and littering, but we also need to talk about overconsumption. It's sort of like sugar. We start eating it and then you can't get enough of it. My more recent project, I worked for 6 months with women incarcerated who are doing their firefighting and learning to be firefighters. They're at Camp 13 in the Santa Monica Mountains. Through the year, they're around and about our mountain areas, clearing and doing other kinds of fire abatement. And then during fire season, they go as far as Yosemite. So every Sunday I would go up there, I would bring supplies, and they could work on their own things for themselves or their families, or they could join in and work with me. They really are very proud of their work. Their families think of them as superheroes. During this project, of course, all those fires last season broke out, and I got pretty discouraged about it. But when you realize that 97% of the fires are caused by humans, you understand the need to educate citizens about their role in this. So the women supplied me with all the content. I interviewed them every Sunday to find out what they thought was important to tell people. And the National Park Service Rangers take these valises around to teach people in the communities about the fire abatement. Each of us taught and each of us learned, so it was really a very fluid experience with them. I see metaphor as a powerful source for connecting people. With pearls of wisdom and the violence, I designed a project based on the idea that an irritant enters the oyster, and to protect itself, it brings forth a pearl. 800 participants were part of this project, mostly women, but also sometimes men and of course children. The idea was that everyone would bring a symbol of their abuser write on Mylar mirror paper, looking at themselves while they wrote the story of what had happened, and then wrap this into beautiful colors of yarn, bandage it, and then paint them. Now, the success of this project was really because it was very challenging to do. I was asking them to do something that would require a lot of new use of tools and materials similar to maybe a first-year sculpture class. And because of the challenge of doing this, they always had to help each other. And that kind of community that was formed in each workshop was really where the success was found for this. Many institutions do work with artists now, and in the case of this one, I worked with the Natural History Museum. The best scenarios are when organizations appreciate the value of the process and have faith that the outcome that they can't imagine today will manifest through very attentive interaction with all the people involved. No one person at the table holds all the answers, and it's really important we come together. The smog collectors are actually a process using a stencil placed on different objects, and then these are placed on rooftops. The smog is very heavy, and the particulate matter, often made from the emissions from cars and trucks and other forms of oil products, land on this so that when the stencil is removed, the image is made from the smog in the air. I do a lot of workshops with different kinds of groups for this activity, Air Quality Management District to name one. One of the projects I did is all the presidents from McKinley to Bush. Here's a few examples. I left them out longer if their environmental records were bad. Their quotes are written in there. They're quotes about environment and industry. And more recently, I had the opportunity to work with the Garage Museum of Contemporary Art in Moscow. And we selected 10 world leaders. I made stencils of from their official portraits, government portraits, and these were placed not only in Moscow and Los Angeles, but in as many of the capitals of these countries that I could. So they were collecting smog in the leaders' capitals. The leaders need to be accountable for their words. The quotes on these are quotes that they made during climate conferences, and they're excerpts from those. As individuals, I believe we all, us included in this room, are really trying to continue to be better citizens, and I feel that the leaders need to follow suit. These art projects really bring together the process of action, discussion, and community for the participants, and they also become the audience. And I really do believe that we can go forward in this kind of way. Thank you very much.
Beautiful work. My mouth was gaping open the entire presentation. Wow. Next up, we have Joann Amalfi. Let me give you a little background information. Joann Amalfi directs, performs, and engineers projects and events that have theatrical, installation, public art, educational, and civic organizing components. In 1985, he founded the Los Angeles Poverty Department, known as LAPD, a performance group comprised primarily of homeless and formerly homeless people who make art, live, and work on Skid Row. LAPD creates performances and multidisciplinary artworks that connect the experience of people living in poverty to the social forces that shape their lives and communities. Please welcome Joann Amalfi.
Okay, so this is a map of Skid Row. The darkest portion there, in the 70s, after Bunker Hill was built, and basically Bunker Hill was corporatized, right? There was a business plan to do the same thing with everything down to Alameda Street. At the last minute, some young activists came in and they saved 50 blocks that became known as Skid Row. I started working there in '85. We were doing a talent show on what was known as Thieves Corner, the corner of 5th and Wall Street. The guy in the shorts, his niece just contacted me this week wanting to know about her uncle. we eventually started making bigger shows. This is about one of our members who had ended up in the hospital after being thrown out of a window, and we nursed him back to health. This is a hallucination scene he had while in the hospital. And we made a show with him about that, called Jupiter 35. Then people wanted us to, we started traveling to other cities under something called LAPD Inspects America, and worked with people from our group, with people, in this case in Houston, to make a show about what was going on for people living without houses and homeless in Houston. Later on, after working with a lot of drug recovery programs, we decided to do something about the war on drugs and the devastation that it brought. And in 2001, we did it here when there was a treatment versus incarceration initiative on the ballot, and subsequently did it in Detroit, Cleveland, a lot of places where drug reform was in play. Ultimately, we did it as Agentes y Activos Totalmente en Español in a 10-tour city tour of Bolivia with a cast of Bolivianos and people from our group. This is in La Paz. Because there, people, of course, thought the problem with the war on drugs was the Americans who were buying the drugs, even though this is a utopia dystopia. We did it in 2007 after a big, right before the housing crisis, a big wave of gentrification, and the question was, can you build a new downtown on the backs of suffering of the people who actually live there? We did a Skid Row History Museum. You can see the same map, which is where Skid Row was saved but squeezed into 50 blocks. This was at the Box Gallery in 2008. It was a study for a public art project. It was so challenging, of course, that the politicians didn't refuse to have it happen. This is State of Incarceration. Again, we made it during when the prison overcrowding case in California was going to the Supreme Court, and we worked with one of the lawyers in that case, Michael Bean. And in this case, for the show, the audience sat on prison bunk beds, so did we, and the whole show happened in the little spaces. We started doing a festival for all Skid Row artists 10 years ago, to instantiate, again, that Skid Row is a community. People have lived there for a long, long time. And it's a dynamic community. We have a record of 900 artists who participated in one or more of our festivals. We do a parade. The next one is May 23rd, every 2 years, called Walk the Talk. We have a community nominating process, and we make little scenes that play out in front of places associated with people living and working in the community who have done transformative things. We have a New Orleans style brass band. We have an artist who does that thing, portrait. This is called Biggest Recovery Community Anywhere. Again, you know, the neighborhood is often tarred and feathered as a place, where drugs happen, therefore get rid of it. In fact, it's the place where free recovery programs are, and where there's housing so people can get and move into the neighborhood. So when we did this, we counted 80 recovery programs run by people living in the neighborhood each week. So it's a very sophisticated recovery community. We did a protest in front of the New Genesis Hotel, which was a housing first hotel on Main Street, but its neighbors had pressured them to not have mental health services on the first floor of the building, but instead have a bar, even though everyone in the building was in recovery or working on that. And then we made a show. We actually won. And we appealed it to the zoning. We won, and we made a performance called What Fuels Development, which was taken from a transcript of the hearing where the commissioners ended up crying, actually, after many community residents had testified. The city's redoing their zoning and making new community plans. We did a show 3 years ago knowing that was going to happen, called The Back Nine, which looked at land use, and you could play miniature golf, and you could learn about land use, and the possible removal of the long-standing communication in an upzoning thing. And we made a performance about it too. So there's actually that's a Donald Trump puppet there playing golf with the audience around it. And tonight there's a sequel to this show opening at our Skid Row History Museum at 250 South Broadway. We did a project about, after several police killings of people living on the street, we did a project about community-generated public safety, and this is a community conversation where we had a lot of inner circle of a lot of wise people who work in the neighborhood talking, and an audience of other wise people from the neighborhood listening. And this is the show we made called I Fly, or How to Keep the Devil Down in the Hole. And that's the outline of one of the people that was killed in the street. Oh yeah, so this is a talk that we did just recently with housing activists in Little Tokyo, Skid Row, and Chinatown, talking about the new community plans that are coming down the pike. And the show we're opening tonight is called How to House 7,000 People in Skid Row, and you can build your own solutions by piling up boxes that represent dollars in housing units to create $3.5 billion that if these policies were enacted would house 7,000 people in Skid Row. Oh yeah, this is our archive. That's Henry Apodaca, our amazing archivist, one of them. And you can come and check it out.
Good to know there's a show opening tonight. We can come check out your work.
That's right.
That is fantastic. Yeah. Next up on the mic, we have Nobuko Miyamoto. He's a song, dance, theater maker and founder of Great Leap, a community-based performing arts organization since 1978, which engages people of diverse cultures and creative process to experience interconnection with each other and Mother Earth. Originally a dancer in films and Broadway, Nobuko found her voice as an activist and troubadour in the 70s during the Asian American movement. Nobuko Great Leap pioneered in putting the Asian American story on stage with concerts and musicals for communities hungry for their own reflections. Responding to racial divisions in LA's 1992 uprising, Great Leap brought together Asian, Latinx, and Black artists to perform their first voice stories on stage. After 9/11, it used its artistic practice to confront Islamophobia, working with faith communities, addressing global warming from the point of view of people of color. Nobuko's eco-vids are collaborative environmental music videos seen on YouTube, and as part of the Japanese Buddhist community, Nobuko's songs and dances in the Obon tradition are performed by thousands in yearly Obon festivals. Partnering with Quetzal and the Japanese American Cultural and Community Center, she co-produces Fandango Obon, a pluri-ethnic festival of art, culture, and environment. Wow, there's a lot of great work here. Please, welcome to the mic, Nobuko Miyamoto.
I grew up without a song. Sure, we had a scream, a howl, a rowdy laugh within us, but our silence was a muzzle imposed by our experience as survivors, stripped of our rights and imprisoned. We didn't make too much noise. We were quiet, loyal Americans. While still refugees in Utah, my father took me to my very first concert of music, classical music. I was 4, and that beautiful music changed me from a lost, lonely child. It made me want to dance. When my family got out of camp, I was called Joann instead of my real name, Nobuko. I loved classical music and thought the Japanese music my uncle chanted was weird. I got a scholarship at American School of Dance and was on my way to a career. So, I'm 18. I'm on Broadway stage in Flower Drum Song. We're singing the Rodgers and Hammerstein song, Chop Suey, Chop Suey, and I'm feeling kind of uncomfortable. Then it hits me. We're Chop Suey, Chinese food for white people. Okay, jump, cut. It's the 60s. People of color struggling for civil rights, black power, brown power, red power, the Vietnam War, the third war in my lifetime, killing people who look like me. Asian Americans are taking a stand. We are the children of the migrant worker. We are the offspring of the concentration camp. Sons and daughters of the railroad builder who leave our stamp on America. Now this song and the many others that followed changed my life. Songs were a powerful way to push our movement forward. Songs helped us build relationships across borders of color. Having our own song transformed how I saw art and what it could do in the world. It was time to tell our own stories in song, in theater, in dance. I work with many wonderful artists, eager to express their own authentic selves. The Asian American movement birthed a cultural renaissance. Now, Reverend Maskodani gave us the social hall at Senshin Buddhist Temple in South Central LA, a place to teach, rehearse, create, and launch many projects. He had a clever way of teaching Buddhism. He gave me an assignment. Write an Obon song in English. I don't know anything about Japanese music. Write an Obon song. Obon is a participatory music and dance form. We dance in a circle to remember our ancestors. Dancing Obon, you feel oneness. You experience interconnectedness. A few more Obon songs, and many years later, I meet Quetzal Flores. He introduces me to another participatory music and dance form, Fandango, from Veracruz, Mexico, bringing together African, Mexican, and indigenous influences. In Fandango, musicians play guitars called aranas, surrounding a wooden platform called a tarima, where dancers stomp their rhythms. In Obon, musicians play on the center platform, and dancers dance around the platform. I asked Quetzal, what would happen if we combined Fandango and Obon? He said, yes. We meet with Reverend Mas. He throws us a title, Bambutsu no Tsunagari, 10,000 things all connected. Yes, and it shouldn't be a fusion. It should be a conversation, each maintaining our cultural essence. That's Reverend Mas. So we write a song. We call the Japanese and Mexican communities together to join us on the Noguchi Plaza at the Japanese American Cultural Center. Isamu Noguchi, he designed that plaza, that circle of bricks for Obon. Fandango Obon gives us the space to share traditions that have held our communities together. It helps us remember times we've shared with our neighbors. We use our bodies, our whole beings to remember. In our workshops, in communities around LA, we share our traditions across cultures. Here, Johanna shares West African dance with Japanese youth. We share stories and food traditions for caring for the earth. We demystify the artistic process with collective songwriting and dance making. We are starting our 8th season of Fandango Obon. To step in the circle of Fandango Obon is a potent communal act. In this circle, we reclaim our power, our creativity. We make music with our own hands, our own voices. In this circle, we weave our many roots, knowing diversity makes us stronger. In this circle, with our feet, we remember we belong to the earth. In this circle, everyone is equal, everyone is seen, everyone has a place to be. In this circle, there are no borders, no us, no them. In this circle, we enact the world we want to live in. And it all started with a song.
Wow. As an artist and activist, I am fanning out over the tremendous work that you've all been doing. Why don't you come on up and let's have a conversation with the rest of the room about your work. What was it that made the arts a vehicle for change that you, what was it that made you want to use your art to try to change things?
So we didn't have to go to Hollywood.
That's a good reason.
I mean, we needed an alternative to Hollywood where we were invisible. We needed a place where we could control the voice that and create our own voice.
I think for me it was actually grew up out of an opposite place of sort of a dismay of creating work and then having it limited to venues like, say, art, just only art venues, and realizing that only my friends were coming and everybody thought the work was great, and there's sort of a dissatisfaction at a certain point. So my audience now, I think of, are anybody who's a stranger to me.
How do you see all of your work intersecting in this city? Or do you have, I noticed in a couple of your slides, I see people in arts that I know, that I've seen all over the place, all working in these different environments. But how do you see your work personally intersecting outside of just being on this panel together?
So you're working just down the street from us, actually, right?
Yeah,
We're on San Pedro, and you're...
Yeah, and I think, well, I mean, in one of the slides I was showing this work that was being done around zoning and planning with people from Chinatown, Little Tokyo, and Skid Row, all downtown people that want to remain in their communities and don't want them to be, taken over by and be displaced. So.
I think the reality is that all of our problems are connected. They're not separate problems. And even though we may be working in different areas, it's really part of the same issues that we're working on.
Yeah, I have strong agreement with that. When I was working with the families coming out of domestic violence, and then I was also doing the environmental work about the same time, it was very striking to me that the violence that we have against people is the same violence against the environment. And so that interconnectedness that you say, it's really an attitude that collectively we need to, move past, to realize that there's more care that we need to give individually as well as to the world in general.
What are any of what's challenging about your work here in Los Angeles?
Well, one thing about working in Los Angeles is a lot of the things that we deride on the national political scale, because everybody in the municipal government here is a Democrat, right? Everyone is a progressive Democrat. But when it comes to land use and a bazillion dollars that can be made, then suddenly people get quite, ruthless, and so that's a befuddling situation here in LA.
I forgot the question.
It was what is challenging about your work here in Los Angeles?
I think LA is a huge, you can't say you work in Los Angeles. I mean, it's so huge. And I think the thing is to make people show that we have connections between us, that we've lived amongst each other, we shared neighborhoods, we've shared experiences. But to show that is difficult because it is a huge city and people can't really feel that connectedness.
Yeah, I think for me, because I do public art also, and I've seen that it's really hard to encourage people to think about projects that they've never seen before. They have a worry of how it's going to impact their agency or organization. So I get a little sad how, we've sort of lost a lot of the poetry that we used to have. I guess people read poetry less than they used to. So trying to push a metaphor on somebody is a little like complicated.
I'm wondering, what is exciting out there now? Either work that you have upcoming, or other artists and that you follow. What excites you in other arts around the city?
I'll answer it for everybody. Okay. No, I'm just kidding. But I just think there's a lot of creative energy out there. It's shocking, and part of it because we can communicate so easily and see what's going on the internet, I suppose. But I'm just shocked at any given day how many options there actually are for all sorts of layers and levels of events. And it's all very like a positive thing, I think. We're despite all the destruction we think, and focus on around us, there's an extraordinary amount of creative production, and that's a great thing.
Because we're here and Ann Burroughs talked about this was the place that Japanese Americans, including myself, were picked up and sent to camp. What excites me right now is that Japanese Americans are standing up for those people who are now in camps. And we are actually going to go to Washington to do a protest. Fandango Mon, we've created a piece called 120,000 Stories that relates our stories of Japanese Americans with the Latinx populations who are separated and incarcerated as we were. So that it really heartens me that we have something that in our own history that connects us with this present moment.
I would say, the sort of the exchanges and alliances that showed up in both of your presentations are things that are really exciting with Capsal and the Fandango Oban. I did the Oban workshop last night. Yeah, and when you were talking about working with women firefighters, we've also not worked with. I mean, we know some of the people who've been women firefighters, and so I think there's LA. There's so many people that have been and continue to work. And what Kim said earlier about getting outside of the just making art that's only for your friends or for artists, that's something that I think has a lot of traction in LA among people of many artists of many generations, including younger artists.
I think we're all bringing art into the community, making it available and accessible, and actually making people feel that and understand that they are creators as well. They don't have to be observers, and that art is alive and well and happening all around us. And I think that's important. It shouldn't be something that we're separated from and we're just looking at and admiring. It's a practice that everybody can engage with, and that's what I think this whole Transcendients presentation has been about, is that all of these artists in some way, shape, or form are engaging people in communities to make social change.
When you talk of using art to engage communities in social change, I know there are several initiatives at play or have been in play to infuse more arts into every aspect of how the city operates. How do you see that surge of art infused into all of our civic establishments changing the way the city works?
I think it's. I mean, one thing good about artists is they and preachers are the only people who can just hang up a shingle and announce, the Church of John or something. So I think having independence and an independent position is maybe more promising. I would regard that as more promising than being absorbed into the city or county or anybody. Architect, artist infrastructure that's been determined by on that side. Better to be artists out there causing trouble, creating confusion, and expanding the universe.
Yeah, we're pushing it out there. We're forcing them to deal with it. It's coming from the bottom up rather than, you know, the top down.
Yeah, the other thing, I think, like a couple decades back, the agencies you're talking about, like, say, cultural affairs departments and LA County Arts and stuff, there was such a focus on permanent artworks. You know, like if we're gonna put the money in, it's gotta be something that's got a tangibility to it. And it's been beautiful to see the transition that an event, even an event for a moment or an impromptu event, is having funding possibilities. It doesn't just have to be something that's more corporate or conservative in the way we look at art. It could be something a little more outlandish. So maybe they are reading poetry then.
Well, let's hope so. I'd love to continue this conversation, but we should do so out in the lobby where there is tea and hopefully a little sunshine coming to the windows. So I want to thank our panelists again and thank you all for joining us. And let's keep talking in the lobby. What do you think?